Hello and welcome to In a Spiritual Sense, where we discuss all things spiritual. From growing your intuition, speaking with spirit guides, diving into past lives, the paranormal, and more, join me, Stacey Piagno, where we work to bridge the gap between science and spirit. Hello and welcome back to In a Spiritual Sense. I'm your host, Stacey Piagno. Today we are going to take some time to talk about the different levels of consciousness. What kind of energy exists in each of these spaces, and what are the benefits of tapping in? Today we have with us special guest Crystal Cassidy, who will walk us through these different realms and share with us her experiences. Crystal is the CEO and founder of SoulPod, a soulfulness app where you can find powerful structure to become more aware of your inner world and then transform it. Her spiritual journey started around the age of 12 when she was introduced to meditation while training to become a world champion martial artist. Since then, Crystal has become a certified Reiki master, breathwork facilitator, meditation guide, and kundalini yoga instructor. Through all of her experience, her mission is to bridge the mystical with the empirical, grounding others to unlock their potential and embark on a journey of personal and collective awakening. I'm so excited to get into today's conversation. Please welcome Crystal Cassidy. Hey, Crystal, welcome to the show.
Hi, Stacey. I'm so excited to be here with you today and ready to get into some deep, fun stuff.
Yes, me too. I am so excited to talk to you. I know when you and I were first discussing this episode and where to dive in, something that really intrigued me about you was all of your experiences with these different energetic spaces and all of your experiences with different types of consciousness. And so whether it be angels or ghosts or demons or extraterrestrials or something other than these names, I thought it would only be fitting for us to dive into this and dissect it a little and maybe use some of your experiences to help explain this, because I know people, including myself, are very curious about this. And it's something that we don't always get to talk about. So we're going to get into a lot today. I would love for you to start by telling everybody who you are and what first awakened you to the idea of the metaphysical and the liveliness of spirit.
Oh, such a good question. The liveliness of spirit. Love it. Yeah, so by background, I have a deep background on the science side of things. So I have a degree in biochemistry, worked in biotech and cutting edge genomics and cancer research most of my life. So I have this very like logical, analytical side to my mind. But the other side of that coin is the spiritual and the mystical. And it's been such an adventure and a journey trying to unite both of these worlds. But very long story short, I think the initiation point was over a decade ago, probably in 2011, 2010, 2011. And it literally started with me waking up in my apartment and I had this inexplicable energy, this blue light all around me. And I couldn't, my logical mind was trying to figure it out and it freaked out. And so it's a story that one of my good friends and I still laugh about because it freaked me out so much that I literally ran from my apartment down the street at 3 in the morning to my friend's place, knocked on her door and was like, I don't know what I was just in or what that I was experiencing. So that was the very beginning of the metaphysical experience that really caught my attention. And then I started to open up to it. And I had already been meditating since I was pretty young because I did martial arts for 12 years. And it was a big part of that practice. And I was very lucky to be exposed. So I think I was pretty primed around that time to kind of open up to these new realms. So yeah, that's the beginning.
I love that you mentioned martial arts because I've talked about before, I'm an athlete as well. And
Yeah.
I know with martial arts, it's really interesting because you do have more of that meditative side of life. For me, I was always a pitcher. And so it's all about focus. And I realized as I got older, having the training to be able to focus your mind for long periods of time really does come in handy when we get into the spiritual side of things and we are trying to meditate. So I kind of love that connection that we both kind of have that background. So let's just jump into this. You have a really incredible perspective where you have linked different levels of consciousness to different spaces or different realms, if that's the right terminology. I would love for you to go through some of these spaces with us today and describe what kind of energies one might encounter. And maybe we can start with some of your experiences as we go through these to help us connect with what's there.
What's there? I
Yeah.
think realms is the right word. I like that word a lot because, and if we think about, there's kind of two ways I like to think about this at a high level. The first one is there is a tie-in between these realms and your awakening. Like you mentioned, they're levels of consciousness, and as you move into these different levels of consciousness, literally new realms open up that you can experience. And this has been at least my experience on the awakening journey. And so I think of it as a staircase. So there are these levels. And so when you're awakening, you're jumping up to a new level of conscious, a new foundation from which you're operating from. And then you have this time where you're integrating, you're understanding this realm, you're addressing the things that come up because you're seeing more as you bring more light into your experience. And then you may jump up another rung on that staircase and then you kind of level out for a while. And so you can kind of think of it that way. Another way I love to think about it is the spiral. So you're always moving, you're always evolving, and you just might be looping around a certain level of consciousness for a period of time, and then you're moving upwards and upwards and upwards, and as you do, you can experience new things, both in your analytical mind and your spiritual mind, if you will. So the first realm that at least I encountered when I was awakening is the subconscious. So I call it the subconscious spiritual realm. And this is when you're first awakening and you're just realizing you're in the cave of your own experience and you're turning the light on and you're like, oh, there's some interesting things here, both in your own mind and in this level of consciousness that you're starting to awaken. You're starting to look into the subconscious. And one of my teachers warned me as I was first awakening. She's like, be prepared because as you awaken, you're going to start to experience more. And that first realm is the darker realm. So I think a lot of times this can elicit fear at first. And there's a lot we can talk about in this realm, and you always have your own power and your own protection you can call in. But it is the darker realm. It's what we call demons, negative entities. And in my experience, this realm is really calling on you to start to realize your own power when it comes to your relationship with the dark side of your own mind and your own subconscious beliefs and limiting beliefs. And also in this realm through these entities, which are kind of a reflection, I think, of our subconscious anyways. They're interacting with you almost as a reflection of you. And once you realize that, and I can share a story about my big kind of realization in this realm, then you really start to step into your power on the awakening journey. And so if we want to get into that story, it's a little
Yeah, no, I
dark,
would love to.
but
I love, and I was gonna, and maybe I think you've kind of answered this. Why is it that this is one of these entry levels of consciousness? Is it because we're just so open and we have to learn? You were mentioning we have to learn that things are a mirror of us. Can you explain a little bit about that? And then, yes, I want to hear your story.
yeah, I mean, it's a really, really big question. And at least in my experience, I think it's both and. I think you're opening your awareness to more. And so, as you open your consciousness to be more non-local than local, limited to the brain,
Hmm.
you're starting to pick up on those vibrations or frequencies that are also non-local. And that's an expansion. I think it's like it's putting on a new set of glasses, and all of a sudden you see things in a different way. They were maybe always there in a certain frequency. You're just now tapping into it. I also think there's an element of your own subconscious that comes into play. And it's asking you to wake up. It's almost like a mirror. And if we think of this universe as being a hologram, we're always interacting with basically other elements of our own minds. And so I
Hmm.
think that's a part of this. I don't know if I have a really definitive answer on it, but that's my intuition is that there is a tie into the subconscious mind and these darker entities. And they will interact with your subconscious sometimes, even in the sleep state. That's a lot of times how people start to become aware of these energies and frequencies and entities.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great description. And I agree. I believe, I very heavily and strongly believe that what we are experiencing is a mirror of us. I talk about that a lot in a lot of different ways. And I think one, on a vibrational level, it's a mirror because you're calling in what you are and or you're calling in what you are participating with energetically,
Yeah.
whether it's another entity or just the energy of that frequency. So I very much agree with that. Tell us about your story with this. How did this first start and look like to you?
Yeah, I started to perceive, and I was not a kid kind of growing up that perceived ghosts or anything like that. This was very much, in my early 20s, waking up to this dimension of both the subconscious realm and the disembodied realm, which I believe is what I call ghost.
Okay.
They're kind of like a fingerprint left behind of a consciousness.
I like that.
And they're a lot of times left with their compulsions. And you can kind of
Mm,
tell with ghosts, they tend to do the same thing over and over. There's confusion, they're in between realms. And I think when you're going through these realms, it's important to also give yourself a lot of grace. There's nothing wrong with you that you're all of a sudden you're perceiving darker things or ghost. It's nothing that's your fault. It's actually a really good sign in my mind of like you're awakening, like we said, to these new realms. And so you're on the adventure at this point. You're on the journey. But for me, it was starting to perceive ghost, disembodied consciousness. Sometimes they were very benign. Like I had this fisherman, old man that was around for a while, and he was just very curious about everything I was doing to the point to where I'd wake up after having a nap on the couch and he would be arching over me,
oh,
just
wow.
like I was like, okay, dude, like we need to figure something out here. But I got very excited about this because the scientist in me was like, well, this is proof
Mm,
that consciousness or frequency or energy is non-local. There is something else going on. There is some sort of field. And so I think sometimes we forget that firsthand experience, observation, experience is a data point. Like it then becomes less of a belief and more of a knowing.
mm,
Um, but this went on for a few years, and I did encounter, very long story short, came across a negative entity that had tried to infiltrate one of my friend's sleep states. So she was kind of in a sleep paralysis, felt like she was fighting something off all night, and had woken up and was scared. And so she called me over and she's like, can you come over and help me kind of figure this out? And I did. And we looked up her experience that she had in the dream with this darker entity that was kind of pulling her down layers of consciousness, which sounds very scary, but
mm,
this is where we start to remember our own power and
mm,
assert our own energy and our own frequency, which is always going to be more powerful. It
mm,
will always be more powerful. You just have to wake it up within you. And I remember sitting there in the room with her, and I was like, if this entity comes after me, I'm going to be so upset. And I could feel in that moment, I was like, okay. And sure enough, that evening, I I was sleeping and I woke up and this I don't like to describe the entity because I'm not necessarily gonna call it in,
Right.
but but a very scary, very, very cinematic entity um that was visible in the by my own eyes and then evaporated and my bed started shaking. And
Mm,
I was like, oh, okay. And my feeling with this particular experience is that she couldn't get into my subconscious in the sleep state. So she was trying to mess with me in the conscious state.
yeah.
And I remember sitting there and I was like, this is crazy. Like this would be in a movie. I have some sort of demonic entity here that's shaking my bed aggressively. And I started talking to her. And this is what I really would love listeners to kind of take away from this. I started to talk to her and I was like, I understand you're here and I appreciate what you are, but this is not the space for you. And her response was more aggressive shaking of my bed. And I leaned over and grabbed a candle and I lit a white candle and I was holding it. And I felt this, I actually feel it now. I felt a big vibration come through, but I felt this power come into me. And I was like, this is not your space. Time for you to leave. But with some compassion too, or like some
Hmm.
understanding and acknowledgement. And it was this big energetic exchange. And I felt her leave. And I went right back to sleep and I slept like a baby. But it was such a conceptually crazy experience, like seeing the scariest thing that you could imagine
Yeah.
and being the one to deal with it. I think after that point, I had this level of confidence that I was not scared anymore. And so after that, I kind of left that realm. That was the step up.
Uh,
And I don't experience dark entities very
yes.
often anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have so much coming up. First of all, I can see your aura right now. I just see like the white, and it's just like it expanded so much when you were talking about holding the white candle and just confidently yet respectfully asking. Your aura just went crazy. Um, but no, it's funny.
I could feel it.
I yeah, I believe that these types of situations you were kind of starting to mention are almost like a catalyst for us to find our inner power, right?
Yes.
It's like it's almost an initiation if you want to think of it like that, but I don't think it's that petty in spirit world. But it's like
Yeah.
it's a way for us to find our power and step into that. And I think that this is also a good little lesson for life as well. I feel like we learn through opposites. When we pray and ask for things, I talk about this all the time. Sometimes spirit gives you the opposite, and the opposite is a gift because it's actually giving you what you want. So that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about that.
I love
But
that. Mm.
yeah, and I just think I love also that you mentioned that you were able to kind of maybe not see the good in this spirit, but you have to understand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my belief all spirits, whether they were people or not, they should be treated as we want to be treated. And this reminds me, so I work with kids, and when a kid is having a tantrum or when they're angry or when
Yeah.
they don't know how to work with their own energy or emotions, that is what happens. It sometimes gets worse because they're just expressing themselves. And I think a lot, I will be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with dark entities, at least that I
Mm.
remember. But I think about this a lot and I think about, well, like, what would I do? How would I feel? And
Mm.
that's how I want to believe I would react or feel because I I hear people talk about this all the time. You know, I listen to a lot of psychics and mediums and people who work with energy, and they say that the answer is to, in a way, give it love. You know, you have
Yeah.
to give it understanding in addition to your confidence and creating boundaries and
Yeah.
asking and saying what it is that you will allow. And I believe that that comes in with us learning how to build confidence for ourselves, which again is a catalyst for that. But yeah, is that how you
Yeah.
would say you would protect yourself is through the
Mm.
confidence and the understanding that everything can be loved. It is energy. There's no fear of life and death here. It's just more of an understanding. What's coming up for
Yeah.
you now? Yeah.
Oh gosh, such a good
So
question.
much.
Um, the first thing that comes up, and I can feel this, and it's so interesting talking to you. I can feel my energy.
Yes.
It's like, woo. Um, but the first thing to remember is that your soul, your essence, cannot ever be harmed.
Mm.
And I think once you embody that knowing, there is some level of like, you can't really mess with me, confidence that comes up. I mean, and there's, we're learning how to bring more of that soul into this dimension of the personality and the ego and the human body and this experience. But I do think it kind of awakens you to that power and that possibility. So that is definitely the way that I think about it. The confidence is a big one. And I think once you
Mhm.
have that moment where you break through and you can feel yourself creating your own reality, whether through boundaries or through intention, that confidence starts to grow and grow and grow. And it becomes a practice and it becomes really fun.
Yeah, I love that. It is fun for me too.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so this is the disembodied slash the subconscious realm that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is there, and again, this is, your definition of them. Is there a difference between those two, or do they kind of go hand in hand?
Everything intersects. And I think it's not a black and white type of separation, but I think the subconscious realm has its own kind of energy and frequency. I think the disembodied ghost, like human consciousness left behind on the planet, is it's also its own kind of realm, but I do think they intersect in some ways.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like an inner outer type of thing. I
Yeah.
mean, when we think of subconscious, I think of my inner world, even though the more you learn it's a projection of your outer world. So there's
Yeah.
kind of that sharing of space. And then, yeah, so the disembodied, the ghosts, that's more of an external energy from you. Um, on some level, we can also get into
Yeah.
the philosophy of it's all us, which I also believe as well. Do you have experiences with ghosts at all? Tell
Yeah.
us some stories about that if you have some. I
One
love
of
those stories.
so I had been seeing them for a few years at this point, and we this is one of my favorite stories. So we went to Italy, my husband and I, and he is very much not a believer, but very tolerant of my exploration and what I do
Yes.
for a living. But we were in a underground, middle of the day, no substances, winery. And I remember looking down this hallway and thinking, this is a creepy hallway. It was like lit on the sides with those old-timey candles, and there was wine barrels, and it was very long hallway. And we were kind of behind the tour group, and my husband was to my side, and I was talking to him, and I was just like rambling on like I do. And I noticed he stopped responding to me. And I looked at him and I was like, what's going on? And he kept on looking behind me. And he was like, there's a ghost behind you. And I could feel because of his tone or his
Hmm.
way that he delivered that, I knew there was a ghost behind me. And I turned and I saw the form float off into the wine barrels to my other side. I was like, did it just float off to the side? And he was like, yep. And even for me, and I had been experiencing them for so long, experiencing that in the middle of the day with somebody else was new, and it really kind of shook me up a little bit. And but it was also a moment where my husband and I could connect
Mm.
on this level because now he had experienced it, and he told me he thought it was somebody from our tour group that was walking really close behind me. And he said it looked like an old man with a hat, and he could see the ghost's facial expressions, like very
Wow.
detailed. And the ghost was looking over my shoulder, like very curious as to what we were doing. And as soon as he said, "There's a ghost behind you," he said the man kind of went like this, like, "Oh, they can perceive me," and scuttled off. But it was a nice experience for me because now I could bring him into my world a little bit.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a great story. How do you perceive spirits or ghosts? I know that there's so many different ways to perceive things, and we talk about that
Mhm.
on the show. How does it work for you? What is maybe the most common way that you see things and or just ways that you have seen things or hear or perceive is a good word.
I usually have a sense of some other energy. Um, there was that same trip we were in a castle that we were staying in from 900 AD, so very old.
Yeah.
And I could feel the energy at that point, and th that was a pretty intense experience too, because those spirits or those energies had been there a long time and they were not
Mhm.
interested in going anywhere else. And so we had a little bit of a, you know, things flying off shelves type of experience. But they
Yeah.
weren't too happy that I was there, I think, because I
Yeah.
could perceive them and that was
Mm.
their space. I was
Mm.
coming into it. So there's these relationships of energies that I can kind of feel, and then they tend to materialize in one way or another. But it's very, for me in that realm, very visceral. Like I see them with my eyes.
Hmm.
They're usually transparent, the ghost, and they're usually, for the most part, not too threatening. They're just going about their ghostly days.
Yes.
Um, but at that point in time, because I was going through this realm, I did do my own like protection ritual.
Hmm.
And for me, that was imagining a very permeable kind of sphere of energy around myself that was transparent, but only love and light could come in and out. And I would do that kind of protection quite frequently, and helped kind of just seal my own space. And when I went into other new spaces, I would try and remember to speak to anything that's there and establish a nice living relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really cool. I feel spirits as well, grounded
Yeah.
spirits. I don't believe that I see them that frequently. I do notice that I've been starting to see energy more often, not so much in a like manifestation of their human form, but I'll see a transparent white energy just kind of like swaft through the air or
Yeah.
through the house or through wherever. And yeah, I've learned to just trust what I'm perceiving. So that's the way I
Yes.
believe I see spirits. I also see colors a lot. More so in my mind's eye. I see a lot in my mind's eye. If I close my eyes and focus, then I'll get a lot.
Yeah.
But to my naked eye, every now and then I'll see a few blasts of color. We might get into that a little later when we go into the angelic realm, because that's what I believe it is for me. But yeah, I've been starting to see some of those like wafts of color just kind of like shoot across the living room or move from side to side. And so it's funny, I'm trying to pick up on it more often. I love how you mentioned earlier that you were really into the science of it because I am as well. And our experiences are data. That's what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I love that. I don't know why
Hmm.
more people don't value that. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what science is, especially for those of us nerds who like to continue accumulating more data. Like I write down everything, I keep all my observations, and I am a little scientist. But yeah, that's really interesting.
I
So
love that. Yeah.
yeah. All right, let's get into the next layer, if you will. Would that be you mentioned super conscious realm? Is that
Yeah,
where
I
we go
think,
next? Or no, I'm sorry, the awakening spiritual realm. Is that a next
yeah,
step?
I think the next realm, at least in my experience, that starts to open up is this. You're really starting to come into your heart. You're coming out of the analytical mind a little bit more, and you're starting to trust yourself and your power. And when
Mhm.
you start to enter that area of the awakening spiral, I think you start to have increased access to this spiritual realm of guides. I call them guides, but they're beings either from your ancestral line or your soul family. It also could be from other spaces. Like I have some indigenous guides as well. But these are beings that may have been incarnate on Earth at some point, but they're tied in with your experience, and they can come
Mm.
forward and they can, especially at certain times in your life where their wisdom and knowledge is relevant, um, they can start to come forward into this dimension and meet your consciousness and start to guide you, and you can start to have a relationship with them where you access them when you need them. And for me, this started with my great grandmother, who was on my dad's side, and I kept on hearing from, I didn't see her at first, but different, very intuitive friends of mine and psychics, she would be off on my left-hand side, which is a
Hmm.
lot of times where deceased loved ones will kind of show up on this side of you. And she was kind of the first that came through and felt protective and loving and powerful and helpful. And so I think that's just it's a really nice realm to get familiar with because you have so many more resources than
Yeah.
your own mind and whoever it is that's already supporting you in this dimension. There's another dimension of support as well.
Yeah, this makes so much sense. I've never had the opportunity to meet someone as of yet like yourself who works with these spaces because I've always been kind of wanting to have a little breakdown of how this works. And literally the way you are describing this would be the way I would intuitively like I'm totally connecting with this because my guides, I call them guides too. My
Mm,
guides were the first ones who I connected with spiritually. Mind you, though, I did work in the ghost tour industry for 10 years, and this was towards like maybe my seventh year. And it's funny, like the progression that we're going through. I was connected with the ghosts and all of that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
then when I started to do my internal work, my guides came up right away. And I always think of them. And now, that was about 8 years ago. Now I have better relationships with them. And even recently, I was thinking about the differences between like what I would deem to be an angel versus like a guide. They feel different to me. And
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly what you were saying, my guides, to me, the relationship that we have, it does feel like they are either past ancestors or they are past connections that I've had from past lives or simultaneous lives. I kind of say that loosely because,
Yep.
it's all kind of depends how you look at it. But and I won't go too much into this because I might tell this story later on a different show, but I just recently did a breathwork ceremony where I connected with my spirit ancestors. So not so much my bloodline. Well, I don't believe that they're my bloodline, but who
Mhm.
knows? There can be a lot hidden because we don't always know our blood ancestors. But
Yeah.
I had this whole pull to connect with my ancestors. And I was actually initially thinking about my blood ancestors, and then this huge whole ceremony came up. I went through the entire experience through my third eye. And so it was very real. It was very visceral. I mean, I was there. I could explain everything to you, but I believe they were my spirit ancestors. And actually, one of them came through and shared with me that she was me from another time. She was an old
Mm,
grandmother woman. And I had met my grandfather of the time. And it was all of this beautiful, it was my family. And I
yeah.
felt very connected to them, but they also felt very grounded. Now, granted, these were
Yes.
spirits and I was in a spiritual realm, they still felt more grounded. I mean, it wasn't a ghost. They weren't lingering from the past. They had already passed, but it was this weird thing that you're kind of describing where they either used to be here on the physical plane or they're still
Mm,
connected in some way. And I love how you said it's just more support for us. I mean, I use them all the time now. Actually, two of the I'll say characters two of the personalities at that time are my guides now. Two of them are ones who I
Mm.
communicate with all the time. One of them, I see her, the grandmother slash woman slash me. I see her all the time. I see her face. I draw her. The other one is a little less, I will say, like personified at times, but. But yeah, it's funny how all of these things are connected. Do you have, so you mentioned one of your guides who was an ancestor, was that right?
Yeah, she was a blood
A blood
ancestor on
ancestor. I
my,
like that term.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
my dad's side, and had, from what I understand, a pretty rough life, and was an immigrant. Her parents had died, so she just had so much compassion in her energy. And the more I learned about her from my grandmother, the more I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Like she's just a very loving, very compassionate, very pure is a word that comes through, like just a really beautiful energy, and just wants the kind of the best for me. And so she hung around. I don't feel her as much anymore,
Hmm.
but she was certainly one at the beginning that was around a lot.
Yeah. And they do, I witness that as well. Like they come and go as you need them
Yeah.
or during different times in your lives. I mean, I'm into the whole spirituality of my life at this point. And these guides that I was talking about, they worked with energy. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I get stuff from them all the time. So it makes sense that they're in my life very heavily right now. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that there is a power in meeting and acknowledging guides or loved ones or ancestors?
Yes. Yes, very much so, because I think it's it's energy. I don't know if this is going to make sense. I'm going to do my best here.
Okay.
It's a it's information and energy that's in the unmanifest form in this other realm. And you're a channel, and we can talk about this in a lot of different ways, but by kind of recognizing, acknowledging, and honoring those guides that come forth, and sometimes you're consciously calling them forward, which you can, that's through intention.
Hmm.
I do it all the time, especially if I'm going into something challenging or expansive for me. I'll be like, all right, team, like
Yeah.
let's gather around. But there, I think there is a reason why it also is beneficial for them and that
Mhm.
consciousness, because it's almost like, I think this also, you mentioned past lives, which I think this is the realm where this can also start to become very possible, is to access past or simultaneous lives. And it's the same concept. It's almost like you're harmonizing energies
Mm.
across space and time, no longer just in this space and time, which for most of our human lives we're doing. We're harmonizing energy. You want to call it karma, you can. But when you start to access these realms, you have a whole nother channel to harmonize energy through. And the more you harmonize and awaken this information through these ancestors or guides or past lives, there's something that's happening there that's very powerful. And it's like you're building your energy more and more. More of your soul is coming through, like I mentioned in this dimension. And it's like you're refining the facets of yourself, but you're no longer limited
Mm.
to this space time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I love the word harmonizing. I think it's very healing as well.
Yes.
I think we heal ourselves and all of those connected to us when we step into our spirit, our soul, when we start using and, as you said, harmonizing all of these energies, we're healing everyone involved. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Ooh, I just got a big tingle
yes,
on.
right?
So and this is what's coming up.
Yes.
The past life or simultaneous lives that you're living, you are healing. Like I've had, when I was very sick, I had a past life that was coming through, and we were healing each other. He
Mm,
was going through something very difficult in his lifetime. And through our awareness of each other across space and time, we were doing something really powerful. And when that lifetime kind of left my awareness, I saw him in a whole, like he had entered a whole different expression of his life. And it was so beautiful. And even this past week, I had a past lifetime come up in meditation, and it
Hmm.
was also a very challenging life, but there were patterns coming up in this lifetime that were relevant, needed to be seen, needed to be healed. And now you're doing that for yourself across space and time.
Yes, no, absolutely. I did this really big, again, past life, simultaneous life regression. It was a quantum healing regression, and talked about it on my early episodes. And all of the lives that came up for me were things where the pattern in that life matched the pattern in this life. And
Yep.
that's why I was shown those experiences because there is something that I can heal with me now that will also heal myself back then. It's
Mhm.
incredible. Yes,
It's so
and
cool.
it is so cool. And I
Yeah.
honestly I feel like the tying thing for a lot of this is stepping into yourself. That's what I noticed
Yep.
for me. Oh, it's so cool. I mean, we could talk about it all
It's
day.
so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole other level of healing that you can access in this realm.
Yeah. And as well as the past lives for yourself, getting back to the ancestors. So, one of my ancestors who I feel connected to, I've never met, my grandmother on my mom's side, she passed when my mom was young. And I think
Mm.
about her a lot. And, I've had some psychic friends and medium friends and just psychics who I've seen kind of mention her and say that she's able to live vicariously through me because I'm at a
Mm.
point where it was a little tricky to start the show and express myself and express all these things that we're even talking about.
Yeah.
I think up until now, it hasn't been as accepted, but me being able to live through my voice, which was a challenge for me to overcome, and I am overcoming it, it helps heal my ancestors as well because they didn't have opportunities to speak or to express themselves as we do today. So when we're able to do that, it not only heals us, but it heals them as well. So that's just something I
Mm.
think is important to bring up to,
I love
right?
that. I think especially as women and
Yeah.
being the persecution in a lot of past lives when it comes to women. I mean, what you're doing like with this show is
Mhm.
so powerful. And I totally can feel that and see that you're healing that wound of past lives, but
Mm.
it's all happening now and
Yes.
it's so cool.
Ah, yes, I got chills. That's always a good thing. Okay, so now that we move through the awakening spiritual realm, we've got guides, we've got loved ones. Let's get into the super conscious realm. What do we have
Mhm.
and see here?
Yeah, as you start to move, you could call it upwards, but you're starting to be able to hold more light and see more things, healing along the way. And this super conscious realm, you can access this realm through a variety of different means. For me, it's meditation.
Mhm.
Sometimes psychedelics can like open the door, breath work can open the door. And in this realm, I view these beings as still being of this dimension of space and time in some way, but they're more interdimensional. They're more like highly evolved. Some of them, I think, have transitioned out of the physical body, but they still exist in like a light body that moves in between our dimension and other dimensions. And but it still feels very kind of grounded to me, if that makes sense when I'm talking
No,
about
it
like
does.
living
It
beings.
does to me.
But it's like our galactic kind of brothers and sisters, if you will,
Mhm.
that are on another level of evolution. It's like imagining humans, if we continue, and which I think we will, on this trajectory of awakening. What does that mean for consciousness as a technology and
Mm.
as a tool of evolution? These beings have kind of figured that out, and their frequency can move and they can meet our frequencies, some of them, not all of them. And other ones, they're not going to lower their frequency. Like I know one group of beings who aren't going to lower their frequency lower than love.
Mm.
And so if you want to interact with them, you have to bring your energy up to their level and then they'll come and interact with you. So, yeah, I really view this realm as like You could also put maybe the avatars of Earth into this realm, like Buddha, Paramahansa Yogananda,
Okay.
some of
Hmm.
the very powerful beings who have evolved maybe past the human body, but they still choose to interact with humanity and in this space and time. So it's kind of all over the place, but it's a very powerful realm of elevated beings who can come into this space and time. And I put the highly evolved ET into this category as well.
Hmm. Do you think that these beings act as guides for us, or like, do you think that they can step into that position, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, I've definitely had some that are some of my most active guides right now are
Mm.
these, I call them benevolent ET. And for some people, for me, they're
Oh my God,
blue,
yeah.
blue beings. Um, they are very caring and they have worked so hard to interact with me in a way that's not scary and it's not overwhelming for me. And that alone has been such an interesting relationship to build because I can tell they're very curious. They're very excited to join us, I think, humanity to kind of join the galactic
Yeah.
family. But they're very aware of where it could go wrong as well. And so they're being very careful and caring and very respectful of free will.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I I definitely have one of these as a guide. And I was going to ask you earlier, I have a guide. I would call her a guide.
Yeah.
And it's all blue energy and it's
Yep.
blue. And it's funny. I try not to do a lot of digging into this because I want to have
Mm.
authentic experiences myself. I don't want to like read a bunch about something and then meditate and see what I read, which that's valid in itself, you know?
Yeah.
But so I've really have not done barely any research on any of this,
Yeah.
starting to get into this topic, but I keep hearing the same thing over and over. I've even listened to other people on podcasts who are kind of in the same space as me. Like we all kind of talk about the same thing. We all kind of seem to have the same understanding. We're around the same age. I don't think age matters, but we are. And I've heard them talk about these blue beings or this blue energy. I
Mm.
see. I see my guide. She's a female. I
Hmm.
see blue all the time. I see it with my naked eye. I see it in my mind's eye. I write with her. She channels with me a lot. And
Mm.
everything that you said is how she feels. Um,
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
starting to
Ooh, I can
build,
feel it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Mm.
starting to build a relationship with her more because now I am aware that this is like a thing. She feels very galactic, if I had to use that
Yeah.
term.
Ooh, I
She
can feel
feels,
her.
right? Like she feels, I've had
Yeah.
other people say very like royal in a sense.
Ooh, that's definitely
She's
coming
strong. I
through.
feel her too. She's really strong. And please
Yeah.
chime in if you feel things, because I
Wow.
love to learn about her. But and actually, about maybe a month ago, it was like I connect with her a lot in the evening. I notice like the same time of day, certain it's easier to connect with things. I think because I've set that intention.
Mm.
But right before I get in my shower, I kind of connect. Sometimes I'll go outside and write. And she came through. I was just kind of walking through the house, and she just came through to me real quick. And she just
Yes.
kind of came down, and like I saw her in my mind's eye. It
Yeah.
was probably the most visual I have seen her in a sense of like having like human features. It was still a little wishy-washy. It wasn't perfectly clear, but I saw her and she was just sparkling, and it was
Ooh,
still blue
yeah.
energy, very sparkly, and I got diamond. Like I heard that very clear. I don't
Mm.
know if diamond is a name, is the vibe, is something, and I draw blue diamonds all the time. A lot of times on my throat. Does this mean anything to you? What do you get? I love talking about her.
Yeah, ooh, I felt a wave come through. Yeah, these beings are so caring and
Yeah.
benevolent. And diamond is interesting because that is one of the like metaphors that I've heard for the soul. And
Mhm.
like we all have this like diamond facet of us, and you can think diamond has like all these facets. And
Yeah.
And each of us has different facets that are like clear, which are allowing light to move through it. And then we have other facets that are a little like dirty and they got some stuff on it, and that's our work. That's what we're working
Oh,
on.
yes.
But once the diamond is completely cleaned or clear, I wonder if this is a representation of her energy, is that she has this very clear energy, and it's almost like the diamond then transforms into, it's like it can handle all of the spectrums of light when it's
Mm.
cleared out. This sounds very esoteric,
No, it's cool.
but once that happens, it almost goes back to like pure light, pure just form, pure.
Hmm.
So it's this explosive, powerful process. And so yeah, that's kind of what came up for me, is that
Yeah.
she may be very adept and powerful in the realm of the refinement of your
Ooh.
diamond. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at too. If I had to describe where my progress is, it was funny. I had a reading from a woman who does angel readings,
Mm.
and she was amazing. First of all, I mean, she was very validating for me because I do a lot of channeling, I do a lot of writing, and I mean everything I've written, she said in the way I wrote it. So it was really cool. But she talked a little bit about her. She referred to her as an angel, but that
Mm.
was one thing that she mentioned is it's time for me to basically, whether she used the word refinement or not, it's time for me to refine my energy and to get clear with what I want and to make sure I am clear with my intentions and I am clear when I am connecting. And so all of this is making sense. I do believe that she is here to help me with this. Very
I
cool.
think that's what it feels like. Very,
Yeah.
I do get the question sometimes of like, why do these beings have an interest in helping us?
Hmm.
And I think it's because if everything's connected in the universe, then as we evolve, they evolve.
Yeah.
There's a synergistic relationship that I don't think we're aware of yet,
Mm.
but I think that's why they're so invested in some ways. Because if love really is this connective force beyond romantic, relationship
Right.
love, it's this remembering of our connection, then they recognize us for who it is that we really are. And so there's a natural loving connection that's just, it's very cool. It's
Yeah.
awakening, I think, way, way more now.
Yeah, it's like what we were talking about when we heal our past lives within ourselves or when we heal our
Right.
ancestors through us. It's the same. I think of that. I actually think of this quite often, which
Mhm.
probably is no surprise. But I think about like with angels or these galactic guides that we're speaking of, I think about that they learn through us just as much as we learn through them and or that symbiotic relationship of they're not just here to help us. I believe through us
Mhm.
living our experiences, we are also helping them. And I
Yeah.
love how you brought that into play. There is definitely something there that's very important. It is all connected. So, of
Yeah.
course, yeah. Oh, yeah. Very interesting. Do you have any guides or light beings that you have connected with that you would like to share? Do you have any experiences with some of these on in your world?
So many.
Oh my goodness.
Um, I'm thinking like what wants to. I mean, I think the I think that this is was goes back to kind of the beginning, but I had a dream where these beings came forward, and I knew it wasn't a dream. Like once you have one of these, you're like, oh, it's not my consciousness. And they were very, very caring and very respectful. And my brother had the same beginning of the dream, but mine kind of went further. And
Mm.
it was very much them trying to approach us again, like I said, in a very careful way. And they told me that they're trying to help like humanity over the next few decades. And, I don't want to freak anybody out, but
Yeah.
it feels like this is just a very powerful time for humanity's evolution, especially over the next like 2 decades. And they're aware of it. And they made it very clear to me that they're here to help and
Mhm.
that during certain times they may provide additional assistance. And this was first came to me years ago. And I always wondered how this additional assistance would come forward. But about 6 months ago, and they did call it instruction, and they said, you can choose to follow the instruction or not. It's your free will, right?
Hmm.
And it was 6 months ago, and I got this really unique, had never experienced it before, but I was in the sleep state. But it wasn't a visual experience. It was one sentence that kept on coming forward. And it felt like whoever had sent this energy had gone to a lot of effort to get it through to me. And the sentence was, start accessing that vibration now. And this repeated in my subconscious mind for 3 times, very slowly. And on the third now, I woke up and I was like, ooh, like,
Yes.
felt very powerful and very timely. And for me, it all connected to even like a decade ago when this started to come through. I think this was the first kind of instruction, if you
Mhm.
will. And I think the vibration they're talking about is the heart space. Time to come
Mhm.
into the heart space. And now is the time to come into the heart space even more deeply. And I took that pretty seriously. But in other ways, as far as the ET, they show up very physically for me. Like I can go out on my deck, go into meditation, say, "Hey, who's out there tonight?" And I, can see ships. We had 3 ships come about 50 feet above us, like phase in and out, like a science
Wow.
fiction film. Like it
Yeah.
was, my parents were there, so they witnessed it too.
Mm.
But it was just amazing. Like one of the coolest things I've seen with my human eyes. And
Wow.
so they're very much out there
Yeah. Around us, everywhere.
around us. Yeah.
What did these, I'm always curious. I hear people describe what did these ships look like?
It's actually in an art exhibit. There was an artist that did a rendition of this experience. They were looking for supernatural experiences. It's at the Hoth, I can't remember the name of the museum in LA.
Okay.
Starts with an H. I want to say Hawthorne, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Um, but they were your classic spherical, um, flying saucer shaped,
Hmm.
ships, and probably as big as like the top floor of your house. And I saw at first a flash of light, and that made me turn. And I had not expected them to come. A lot of times I see them kind of far away.
Okay.
I had not expected it to become so close. And so you're kind of reorienting, but they, I think, phased in through the light, and there was 3 of them, flying saucers, a little bit of this like light around the outer rims, like this orange pinkish hue,
Mm.
and very completely silent. And then this towards the center of each craft, it was semi-transparent, like a 10% transparency. I could almost kind of look through the center. And there was 3 of them in a triangle formation, and they just flew right over us, kind of paused for a moment, and then went down the street, which is crazy. But you could see between the 3 of them, there was a little bit of this like interaction, like this. They
Hmm.
were kind of moving. They flew completely smoothly, but the 3 of them had some sort of entanglement.
Yeah.
So it was very, very cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I always, did you have any dreams that night or around that time?
it did.
I'm sure you did. I always hear about, of course. I love the dream
Did, yeah.
space. That's where I spend most of my time. I work a lot with my dreams, and I hear and believe and have witnessed very often that the dream space is the bridge between the
Yes.
material world and the spiritual world. And so I do think that that's where a lot of our communication comes in. But yeah, so you
That's
had dreams around this time as well.
Yeah, and it's definitely how they first approached me as
Mm.
well. And I can usually tell as soon as that happened, and we were all kind of like, whoa. Even me, I was like, that was a lot to process for my human mind. But I could feel that they wanted to connect further, but again, they're not going to approach past your level of willingness.
Mm.
And so I told them, I was like, if you want to connect further, you can in the dream state, make it not scary.
Ah, I love it.
And they did, and they showed up in my dream in like this super funny way. I was in the dream, and you know those stacks of washer dryer and has like the little portal.
Yes, yes.
So I was doing laundry in the dream, and I look to my left, and I see in the portal a ET face.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh gosh, okay." And then kind of ran out of the room in the dream and came back in, and they had shrunk themselves down into this. They were just like two or three of them in the laundry in this portal,
Hmm.
which I thought was so smart because I was like, okay, that's something I recognize. There's a barrier between me and them. And they shrunk themselves down to be even less like threatening.
Right.
And then it was so cute. One of them with like an arm kind of went like this, and then I went like that. And then I woke up, you know,
Oh, cool.
just like the cutest little galactic handshake, if you
Yes.
will.
Oh, that's sweet. And do you think there's any symbology in them being in the washer or dryer? Like
Ooh, I hadn't
cleaning.
thought
Like
about
I
that.
always, this is my dream interpretation coming in. Like
Mm,
why that? Well, it seems positive to me.
yeah.
Either as you clean yourself, as you work on yourself, that connection will become stronger, or there's something there.
Oh,
I'll let
yeah.
you sit with it.
Yeah. I like that. I hadn't thought about
Right?
that.
Cool, huh?
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense.
I love it. All
Yeah.
right. This is amazing. I love your stories and experiences. I think
So
they're
many
so
of them.
helpful. Yeah, I feel like through our curiosity, I feel like curiosity is the seed for connection. You know,
Yeah.
like the more curious we become, like you were mentioning with boundaries, like what we will allow. I think it's what we will allow on an energetic state too. Like we might say, "Hey,
Mm,
I want to connect, but I'm so scared. I'm so scared." Okay, well, your energy has to match what your intention as well. But for
right.
those, I think, who are wanting to grow their connection, I think it starts with curiosity and then we were talking a little bit earlier about bringing our frequency to a level of love or to a level of understanding so that this exchange can happen. So I think that's important too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so
Cool.
exciting. There's a lot of possibility
Yeah.
for expansion and connection, and the more you move up that spiral of
Mm.
awareness, you know, the less you have to worry about the protection side. Like I don't really do
Mm.
much protection work anymore because it's just, you're kind of you understand your energy and you understand other energies a bit better. So I love the curiosity and I think a degree of courage as well,
Yeah.
because a lot of this work is stepping up to the cliff of the unknown, and being open to the unknown is no small feat.
Mm.
So it does take some courage.
Yeah, I agree. I love how you're mentioning that you don't necessarily feel the need to protect yourself as much anymore. I was listening
Yeah.
to someone, he's a shaman, a practicing shaman, his lineages as well. And he was speaking on somebody's podcast, I forget his name, and he was teaching about protection. And he was talking about how in the beginning, protecting your energy is a lot about awareness
Mm.
and learning how to become aware and therefore create those boundaries. And you can use the visualization techniques like the bubble and that kind of whole thing. But then he was also mentioning exactly what you just said. The more you grow as a spirit, you're going to naturally be on these frequencies that dense energy, it's not compatible. So
Right. Yeah.
it's just not going to mix. It's an oil and water type of thing. So
Exactly. That's
yeah,
a really good way to put it. Yeah.
I think that's a really, yeah, makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, so we also have another layer after this, the divine spiritual realm.
Mm.
Archangels, collectives. Can you speak a little bit about this?
Yeah, and again, this all intersects, but I think this realm of archangels, which I think are in some other divine beings, like they're in their own kind of frequency and realm, and they're highly, highly evolved, benevolent. I don't know if you'd call them a species, but like this collective of energies. There's the archangels, there's the angels, there's collective consciousnesses, which are these highly evolved beings that have started to understand the benefits of bringing their consciousness together in a way
Mm,
to expand. I'm still very curious about the collectives. I'm going to see Abraham Hicks later today,
Hmm.
but that's kind of an example of like a collective that can come through.
Hmm.
And so there are humans that, like you were mentioning, there's channelers. You do a lot of channeling. Sometimes these collectives can come through humans
Uh,
as a channel because they hold so much wisdom and so much. It's like they have a bird's eye view of this universe,
hmm.
and they can be really powerful divine guides of all kinds of different layers, I would say. I don't think there's like one layer that all the collectives are in, but there's really interesting wisdom there. And they have a very close connection with the divine, with oneness, with love,
Mm.
with pure consciousness, evolved beyond the personality, beyond the ego, certainly, and the
Hmm.
personality and individuality. So it's a very interesting, expansive realm.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Would you
What do you
say?
think about it?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, do you see, so when you say collectives, is it
Mm.
kind of like all of these people are putting intentions and energy into something and therefore it creates its own energy? Is that the idea of what you're describing?
Yeah, I think in my experience with highly evolved ET is similar. They have they have evolved past thought as being what's a good way to put it? They don't need thought as much, and they
Hmm.
certainly don't need speech. It's evolved to a knowing, an instant communication.
Yeah.
And it's I don't need to explain things in that realm. It's just an automatic understanding. It's automatic communication. And I think the next step from evolving to that point of communication is the consciousness element. And if you can, for lack of a better word, merge your consciousness with another, like if you and I were to merge our consciousnesses, you would have instant understanding of all of my
Yeah.
experiences, all of my wisdom, all of my powers, all of my weaknesses, and what power could come and what expansion could come from us doing that. That's kind
Yeah.
of how I think of the collectives. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm right because I don't come from a collective, but that's kind of my sense, or we do. But anyways,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It's like everything is like, well, we don't, but we do.
yeah. But
I love
that's
that.
kind of my sense at this point is that they have expanded their consciousness and their awakening, if you will, through merging their minds, basically, their
Yeah.
spirits.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And it's kind of a good entry into this next question. So, what do you think all of this means for our evolution as people? It's very clear that more and more people are becoming more mindful and more awakened to the idea of the energetic side of things. And it's not just about the material world, although I do believe that that is important too. A lot of us talk about how it's not just about getting into the energy. We're here living this life for a reason, for a purpose. We're supposed to be in the physical and we're supposed to have the experience and the feelings. We're supposed to feel anger and mad. There's
Mhm.
benefit in that. But as a species of human or humanity, where do you see our future going? And this is just an
Mhm.
opinion, but
Mhm.
as we become more aware of our energy and we become able to communicate through things other than speech, what do you think the future looks like?
Oh my gosh,
Big
like my
question.
favorite. It's my favorite question too.
Ooh.
Um, I think about it a lot, and I'm writing a book actually about this kind of exploration. But I think that there are multiple directions that humanity could go. There's so many timelines, but my sense is that we're either going to, as a collective, choose to optimize for the external, like technological, biological evolution, or we're going to start to prioritize, maybe even above that element of our evolution, the spiritual consciousness awakening part of the evolution. And I think that I'm really interested in species that choose to prioritize one over the other.
Hmm.
I do think there's an intersection where both can fuel our evolution, but I think the spiritual awakening, understanding your own consciousness, has to come first in some
Mm,
degree, because that will help to make sure that the technology that comes forth and the biological implications and how we interact with the consciousness that is this planet will be kind of like shaped and informed. But I think for humans, I think that we're not this like unevolved species, that we're like the kind of class zero type of species that maybe is tempting to think. I think that we're
mhm,
a very powerful species that, if we can step into our own, will be some of the most powerful creators in this universe, in this space and time. And I also think that's why there's our galactic brothers and sisters are very excited to
mhm.
welcome us, because I don't also think they have been involved in humanity's growth, and this goes way back in time, and we might be helping them harmonize some of the energies from the past. But I think there's a huge opportunity for humanity to awaken and become one of those species that can bring a lot of light to this universe and can evolve our consciousness in a way that is just so loving, so that it becomes less about manifestation and more about um, almost like optimization. Like, once you can manifest pretty much anything and move
Mhm.
outside of space and time, you start to have this increased ability to create. And what will we create? I think that that's a very exciting thing to think about. That's
Yeah, it
all over
is
the
very
place, but
exciting. Yeah, no, you answered it beautifully. I agree with you. I think like, oh my gosh, anything we can think of, we can create, right?
yeah.
It always reminds me. So like when I think of ancient history, like
Mm,
ancient history that has been lost, I think a lot of times we hear stories that seem a little more fantasy, like they have a fantasy undertone. But to me, I'm like, well, hold on now. Like, the earth moves in cycles, right? So like I feel like we've kind of been here before, and then now we're coming back to it with a better understanding and maybe a greater expansion to it. So I always think about that. Again, I try not to read too much about our ancient past because I don't want to be persuaded. I want to have my own experiences. But
yeah. I respect that too.
yeah.
I think that the all the information that you could possibly need, you can access yourself.
Mm,
And you can do that through meditation, like I was saying, but that information is all there, and you can develop your own kind of relationship with the past and even the future if you
hmm.
like. But I do, well, you were talking about like epochs and cycles, and I think we are certainly in the tipping point of a new cycle.
Yeah.
And I think women, I think we've talked about like the feminine, but that's rising, that's asking to be balanced. And this coming from somebody who operated very much in her masculine for a good chunk of
Oh,
life.
yeah.
Um,
Me
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Only the masculine.
Only the masculine, like
Yeah.
warrior spirit vibes. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's been a softening in me as well, as I'm like, okay, we're being asked to balance these energies. And there is a pushing against that at the same time, but it's also a part of the process.
Yeah.
Like in your own individual experience, when you start to come up against new levels of consciousness, right before that breakthrough happens, there's usually a moment of great difficulty, challenging emotions, pain in the body, all the resistance you can think about, mind, body, spirit. And then, but that's also such a good sign. I've learned
Yeah.
to really look for that in my own evolution, because I
Mm.
know there's something on the other side. And so I
Yes.
think for humanity, we're kind of at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what we see in the self is what we see in the collective. We've talked about that today. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Look for it. It is a
Yeah.
good sign. And I think something for people to just remember moving forward is like, I always like to call it the pendulum swings back and forth, same thing, or it spirals up or down or whatever direction. But, there is a rise for the feminine. But the rise is to balance the feminine, not to have the feminine take over either. So
Right.
this is
Yeah.
something that I think is very important to say is,
Yeah.
just remember everyone as we come into ourselves, whether individually or collectively, it's about balance. Yeah, sometimes we need to fight and bring about a part of us that has been um, shunned or pushed down. but it's to the balance point. It's not to overtip that as well. And I have
Yeah.
to remind myself about that in my life. I'm like, okay, if I want to fix something, okay, Stacey, don't over fix it. Just bring it up to balance. That's it. Bring it
Mm,
up to balance. And then there's a little bit of that feeling like I need to keep going. I need to keep going. But it's like, no, hold on.
yeah.
Like, do it slowly. Bring it up to balance. And that's just something I think about a lot. I see it in the collective. I see it in
Yeah.
myself. I just thought it was good to say. But yeah.
I love that. I think sometimes when we think about a certain energy having dominated, so we could talk about masculinity,
Hmm.
um, that if the feminine were to rise, it would look the same way.
Yeah.
And I think there's some fear of like, oh, is then the feminine going to dominate, and what does that look like? But that's, I really do think a masculine way to look at the feminine rising.
Hmm.
And
No, I
it's
get it. I
like,
get it.
yeah, it's like, no, the feminine is naturally, I think, very much about balance. And
Mm,
so to your point, and harmony and collective benefit,
yeah.
so I think it's such a good thing to remember that it doesn't have to swing so far in another direction that it evokes fear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, Crystal, tell us, you are the CEO of an app called SoulPod. It's a spiritual wellness app. Can you tell us about this? It's really cool.
Yeah, SoulPod. So I had the opportunity to build something that I hoped would bring a little bit more of the mystical into the spiritual experience. And so our content is both balancing the science of awakening where we can, but also welcoming more of the mystical into your experience. So we go into past lives, inner child healing, a lot of energy center based work, but our app is designed in journeys. So we take users through an onboarding process, get to know where you're at in your spiritual development, and then place you into a journey path that may be most powerful for where you're at right now. And we have pods. So for me, I was a little lonely on my awakening journey, these crazy things happening and trying to make sense of
Hmm.
them. And so we wanted some element of community so that you can rely on people who are in a similar spot as you are. And so we're new, we're on the App Store, and we've got some really exciting stuff coming for 2025.
Yeah, really cool. And something that I love that you and I had talked about is the community aspect of this. I
Yeah.
mean, I agree. When you're first coming into all this spiritual stuff, I think very rarely do we already have a group of people who are on the same page. I feel like when
Yeah.
we step into our spiritual awareness and our spiritual journeys, so to speak, I feel like we're kind of all sprinkled across the world purposely.
Yeah.
And it can be a little lonely and it is nice to have these conversations with people. And so that's something that your app can bring is a community of people who are like-minded to you and who are
Yeah.
on the same part of their journey as you. So I think that all sounds very interesting, very beneficial. Well, Crystal, that's most of what I have planned for us today. Is there anything else that you want to share with us, or are there any other services that you do, or books or classes
Mhm.
that you do?
Well, if you're in San Francisco, we do Kundalini yoga
Mm.
sometimes, different. We got a couple events coming up over the next few weeks at Census. It's a studio in downtown San Francisco. There'll be a pop-up. I'm leading a breathwork journey. Check out SoulPod in the App Store. And we also have a SoulPod retreat coming up this year that we're just now pulling together. It's going to be for 11 light beings. And we'll go deep into each energy center. We'll go deep into breath work journeys. We'll do some ET meditations out in the desert. It's a lot of fun. So that'll be coming up in August of this year.
Where is that going to be?
Joshua Tree.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Very good. That all sounds so exciting. Crystal, how can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me at soulpodapp.com. You can find me also on Instagram, SoulPod app. You can find me yeah, those are probably the best
Okay,
places to find. Yeah.
cool. And I'll put those links down below, guys. All right. Well, Crystal, I want to thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your
Yeah.
experiences. sometimes these stories aren't things that we always share with people. So I want
Yeah.
to thank you for being open because you helped me become open too. I talk about a lot on the show, but even some things today I haven't necessarily shared. So thanks
Mm.
for coming on and being so open with us today.
Oh, and thank you for creating a platform to be open with
Mm,
these stories, because there's certainly some things I shared today that I haven't publicly.
yeah.
So it was just a really nice space to be able to just explore some of this a bit more deeply. So thank you.
Yes, of course, you're welcome. Always a pleasure. All right, guys. Well, that's all we have this week. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope that you use it to inspire those around you. And I will see you next week on In a Spiritual Sense. For those looking to connect further, please feel free to send emails to info@inaspiritualsense.com or hit me up on Instagram, where you can find weekly inspiration and updates. I look forward to connecting with you.